Welcome back. You're watching RT. Now, the UK Prime Minister Theresa May has rejected calls to follow America's lead and stop selling weapons to Saudi Arabia, which is spearheading a bombing campaign in Yemen. RT's Polly Boyko reports in a moment, but let's first listen to what Theresa May had to say.
As the Right Honourable Gentleman knows, we do have a very strict regime of export licences in relation to weapons here in the United Kingdom. We exercise that very carefully, and in recent years we have indeed refused export licences in relation to arms, including to Yemen and Saudi Arabia.
Theresa May says that Britain has a relationship with Saudi Arabia, but to people looking on, it looks increasingly like one of those relationships where you're so besotted that you fail to see the clear faults in your other half, because even the US has now suspended its arms sales to Saudi Arabia because of concerns about the number of civilian casualties in the conflict in Yemen, reportedly as a result of Saudi airstrikes. Officials in Washington have said that there was systematic and endemic problems in Saudi Arabia's bomb targeting, and yet Theresa May is staying loyal, much to the frustration of an increasing number of politicians here in Britain. Take a listen to what they have to say.
Will the Prime Minister commit today to halting arms sales to Saudi Arabia that have been used to prosecute this war in Yemen, with the humanitarian devastation that has resulted from that?
The United Nations believes that 60% of civilian casualties are caused by airstrikes. In the last 24 hours, the United States has stopped the supply of precision-guided munitions to Saudi Arabia to bomb Yemen. When will the UK follow suit?
There are official parliamentary reports that come out with firm recommendations saying that Britain needs to suspend its arms sales to the Saudis until there's an independent investigation looking into the alleged human rights abuses in Yemen. But the cold, hard reality is that it's a material world, and maybe, just maybe, Theresa May is a material girl, because Britain is the biggest arms supplier to Yemen. Saudi Arabia is Britain's biggest arms customer. Throughout the conflict in Yemen, Britain sold over £3 billion worth of weapons over to the Saudis. So we're talking about big business interests at stake here, and if Britain were to stop supplying weapons to the Saudis, it would leave a lot of British businesses out of pocket and the Saudis in the lurch. But the argument that critics have is that human lives matter much more than money. And if you look at the casualties piling up in Yemen, which is actually quite hard to do because the conflict is so tragically underreported, but there have been over 10,000 civilian casualties as a result of the conflict in Yemen. And there are real suspicions that many of those casualties are a result of Saudi airstrikes, which Britain, through continuing its arms sales to its ally, could be indirectly facilitating.
All right, let's now discuss this further with the Yemeni activist and journalist Hussein al-Bukhari. Mr. al-Bukhari, thank you so much for joining us here on RT International. So my question is, why is Theresa May refusing to budge on this issue in the face of so much condemnation, so it seems?
It's all about selling arms to the Saudi. As one MP has asked that, and he said that the UK has sold 3.3 billions in arms to the Saudi just during this war. And I just want to mention that the statement by the UK Prime Minister, Mrs. May, she has clearly lied about some fact. When she said at the end that the so-called this operation is backed by the United Nations or by the Security Council, this is actually a big lie, because the Security Resolution 2216, which has enforced the blockade in Yemen, hasn't said anything about the war and hasn't mentioned the Saudi-led coalition. And this resolution came 20 days after the war started. The war started on the 26th of March 2015, and this resolution was on the 14th of April 2015, so 20 days after. So she clearly lied about that. And when she said if there is any allegation about violation of human rights, there should be a proper investigation. We should, I think I don't know, does she remember that the UK was the one that have blocked to international UN investigation when the Dutch government has a draft to investigate all crime in Yemen, to form an international team to come into Yemen to investigate crime either by the Houthi, by Saleh forces, or by the Saudi-led coalition. The UK has blocked that, and the UK as well has
so what is it essentially down to then? I mean, obviously, if we see so much controversy here, is it down to making money, or is it down to the fact that making money more important than human lives for London? What's essentially the motivator behind all that?
Is all about making money and to have influence in the Gulf region and in the Middle East. We have seen that there seems to be that the United States will give some of its influence in the Gulf, and it will give it back to the United Kingdom. And the visit that Mrs. May has done 10 days ago, I believe, to the Gulf, and she has insisted about the relation between the Gulf and as well Britain. So this is all about, and I mean, to have a relation with the Gulf, it means to have money and to have oil. That's all the Gulf has. The Gulf hasn't got like that kind of either the technology or that they can help the UK in any way, only by selling cheap oil to the United Kingdom.
Well, and finally, before we let it go, just want to ask you one more question regarding arms sales. I mean, Washington says it will stop selling precision-guided missiles, but could that not actually make things worse in the end by encouraging the use of less accurate weapons? Very briefly, if you could, sir, give us your thoughts.
I don't think even the United States, when they say so, I think they have sold to the Saudi enough weapon for them to keep this war for years. And the Saudi has been buying these weapons, even with those so-called guided missile. I mean, 60%, as UN record says, are civilian casualties. So it doesn't matter if this guided missile or not, because those are the Saudi who are using them. And as well, the satellite image and coordination are given by UK and US satellite. So they are all involved in this crime in Yemen, and I think the only thing that they can help Yemeni is either first to send an investigation team into Yemen to lift some of the blockade on Yemen, because UNICEF latest report has said 462,000 children are having severe acute malnutrition, and one kid is dying every 10 minutes. And I think during the Prime Minister of the UK question time, I think it lasts maybe half an hour, 3 kids have died during her lies into the British Parliament.
Situation indeed, Mr. Hussein Al-Bukaidi. Thanks so much for talking to us and sharing your concerns with us here. And that was an activist and journalist from Yemen talking to us here in RT International.